Hello, everyone, and welcome to Plus One EXP's Roll for Content channel. My name is not Tony Vasinda, and I am your nega interviewer here at Plus One EXP. My name is Vi Huntsman. I'm here helping out Plus One EXP, which is a weird little brand that multi-classes in tabletop design, beard and skincare, alchemy, and the Bardic College of Content Creation. The dream and hope here at Plus One EXP is to help amazing designers find great players who love their games, and help amazing players find great designers whose games they can love. That happens a lot of different ways, and one of the main ways is sitting down and playing games with creators or with other designers. But today we're actually talking about a product that's coming out of Plus One EXP itself, a collaboration between Tony Vasinda and Markus. This is, as you all probably can see, the Down We Go game now on Gamefound. There's probably links all around. Tony, Markus, say hello to your own audience.
Hi, everybody. Markus, say hi to people.
Hi.
We're both super excited to be here. Super thankful to Vi for coming on. I'm Tony Vasinda. I live in Philadelphia, and I was the lead developer on Down We Go. Markus, you want to tell people who you are?
Yes, my name is Markus, or Markus in Swedish, Linderum, from Gothenburg, west coast of Sweden. And I wrote the game Down We Go about, 9 months ago, Tony? Yeah. 9 months ago. Posted it online in a couple of groups, and Tony saw it and reached out, and the rest will soon be history, maybe. Mm-hmm. Hopefully. Yeah.
I was able to get a advanced copy, digital copy of what's down so far in the newest version, and we're gonna talk about that today. Is there anything we need to cover before we jump into the game itself? Anything we need anyone to know?
Nope. I'll drop the link in the chat in just 1 second. But if you want to help spread the word, go and retweet or go live tweet. Share this on Facebook to any groups you're a part of. Pop it into Discord for people who you think might be interested in the game if you've already backed. We would absolutely love that. DM Wilson said they love the soundtrack, and that we were listening to on the way in. That is actually music from the Dungeon Synth album for Down We Go that we were listening to on the way in as well. But no, other than that, Vi, hand it back over to you.
All right. I didn't know there was an album.
I need to
do better research. Tell me about that. Wait 1 sec. Yeah, tell me about that.
Yeah, so it was really funny. I was thinking about what we wanted to do with Down We Go, and Markus created this really core, like very elegant game that we'll talk about in a little bit. But Loot the Body, who does this kind of like really psychedelic, like rock pieces that are inspired by old or AD&D, OD&D, like first edition, second edition adventure modules, and then we'll take them and do like songs inspired by different parts of them and create an album that's like Keep on the Borderlands album or other stuff like that. And so I'm just a big fan of their stuff, and there are a lot of little pieces that Markus put in there that have like kind of this, it's like this dark psychedelic vibe that kind of underpins some of the different parts of it. And just so when I was listening to one of their albums one day in the background, I was like, I should just reach out and see if they want to do this, and what it would take to get them to maybe do a couple of songs for us. And so they put together 4 songs that are available now. You can listen to them on the Gamefound page, and then we have a stretch goal that isn't really showing yet. That's one of our higher up stretch goals that we'll release if we get up that high. That adds 2 more songs and a little adventure that'll wrap around the cassette, which we might do that little adventure either way, but it'll be just a little add-on to that as well.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Very cool. The game itself seems really like modular in and of itself, so I feel like there would be no problem getting some really cool gameable stuff even on such a small in such a small format.
Yeah.
So Markus, it sounds like this game has this is kind of a revamp of an idea that you had and kind of brought to fruition several months back. What did it look like then, and what's like being added?
I mean, the core game is pretty much the same. We've added some additional mechanics, like an increase of hit points as you level up, and I mean, some of the abilities we've clarified and rephrased. But the game revolves around these 4 classes, roles, which I call them, archetypes, if you will. and they are the same from day one.
Very cool. Very cool.
Yeah.
And yeah. So let's walk through it here. So this is it's a really like, I mean, I say rules light, but I also want to it's rules dense, which I want to ask about, because it's very cool the way that you have so few numbers working around, but like level, you like see it pop up again and again and again. But yeah, it's like a rules light dungeon crawler with like a hub city that gets described. What was your kind of what was on your mind when you were describing these things? Because the 4 roles on here are sneaky, mystical, holy, and bloodthirsty, which seem to have some like parallels with more common like games that we see around.
Yeah.
What was on your mind when you were taking like in terms of like tabletop inspiration for the design?
I mean, the idea for the game Down We Go has really been on my mind ever since I got into OSR, and that would be like, I don't know, 7, 8, maybe even 10 years now. I'm not sure. And I don't have a D&D background. Being from Sweden, we had our own kind of D&D game. It was called Drakar och Demoner, Dragons and Demons. So that was the game I started playing back when I was like 11, 12 years old, over 30 years ago. And that game, that's a BRP system with different classes and a whole lot of skills and everything. And I didn't really get into D&D until the 5th edition. And maybe that was kind of what pushed me into OSR almost, I think, because this was just too much information. This ability stacks with this. People around the table got mad at me because I didn't like calculate the arc of my spells or whatever.
Yeah.
So I've always had this feeling, and I want to make it easier. I want to make it simpler. I want it to be like all about the interaction, the conversation at the table. So the rules never get in the way of cool gameplay.
Right.
So the idea has been nagging in the back of my head for a long time, and for every like new rule set, new module I picked up, I've another piece was added, and then at one point I was like, okay, I think I have enough up here. I gotta sit down and write this now. So I did that in 2 evenings, and then I just put it up.
Awesome. Yeah, I think that there's a kind of common I don't know, it's like this thing that when people are writing systems like this, I think there's an expectation that comes with it, that it's that person's, like, the way that they run games in their head, because I think we all have a different game in our head when we're actually playing. It's so cool to hear like little bits and pieces like accumulated and filled up until you finally were like, this is a full game, and you put it down. There's more to it than the rules themselves. There's I want to ask about, well, I guess let's talk about the rules for a second more, because I'm a fan. So usually you said like the roles are like archetypes, the sneaky, kind of like the thief, the mystical, the wizard, the holy, kind of cleric, bloodthirsty, the warrior, or the fighter, right? But in Down We Go, as you gain levels, you can mix and, well, actually, from the very beginning, you can actually mix and match which roles you have. So you can have like 1 point in sneaky, 1 point in mystical. What was like, and that kind of breaks down the archetypes into more like character building. What inspired you to allow that kind of free form character creation?
Because that's just something that's always been on my mind when I played OSR games. I don't want to be just a fighter. I want to be a fighter who could also like cook up a potion or throw a spell every now and then. So this was just this is the way I want to play the roles, the archetypes. I want to mix and match. I want to create my own archetype.
Yeah, and so there's the as you're doing that, there's a really elegant way that you have it done, where depending on how many points you've put into each of your roles, that like each time a point gets put in, you get to fill in one of these bubbles that's underneath it. So if we look at like the mystical, then we have pain bolt or sleep or light, missile, invisibility, or wall. And there's a kind of like uneven leveling you can do where you can have like if you put like more and more points into the mystical, then the things that you are mystical, like your mystical skills, improve with that and not with like your overall level. And so yeah, it's very cool. Like you still like have a forte usually, or you like choose to have a balance of more than one. But it's just that was the thing that grabbed my eye when I was reading this, was that like for example with sleep. So if you put 2 points into mystical, then you can do level targets sleep for 1 round, or 1 target sleeps for level rounds. And that's the kind of thing that I hear you loud and clear when you're talking about rules not getting in the way, because it's like, oh, you have like just this one number and you like use it over and over again. When you've been sorry.
Because the whole idea from the beginning was I wanted a game that could, I mean, say you have a game prepared, you're waiting for your players to arrive, and all of a sudden someone texts you and says, "Oh, I'm not gonna make it," and another person just, "Oh, if they're not gonna make it, I might as well be out too." So you end up with fewer players than you had, and you have to do something else. You can't do what you originally planned. So you should be able to just pull this out, and also with the dungeon tools, the game master tools. You should be able to just hand a character sheet to the players and say, make a character. It's all on there. And I'm going to whip up a dungeon here. To get the play going in 5 or 10 minutes. And that is also, that's the, I mean, we'll get into that later, I guess. But this is the part that's being expanded from the core rules, like the setting, the world, and allowing for campaign play.
Yeah. That's what I felt you were leaning toward with that, because it does very much sound like, I guess the word we usually use is like a West Marches kind of campaign, where there's this, there's kind of these 2 areas really of the world. There's kind of like all of these dungeons for which you have included like a bunch of tools for making them. And then there's this like hub city, which it's a play on the word infinity. It was Infinopolis, right?
Yeah.
Awesome.
The other thing,
Tony.
The other thing about the archetypes and the roles that I really love that I think isn't clear initially is they're actually a fusion of like class and stat and skill. And I think skill is the one that people miss, because people will be like, well, okay, you get these abilities, but what if I want to do like X? Well, if it's a holy type thing, roll plus holy, right? If it's like, if you want to understand a religious ritual that's not evident, or your character doesn't have a background reason to know, which you could just ask somebody on the spot to make up. But if they don't, they could roll to figure it out or to try to do it. Or if they want to pick a lock but they don't have the lock picking ability, they could still roll plus sneaky if they have lock picks to try to do that. And so that moving all the actions into one set that automatically achieve because they're things, and then the other set based on the same exact leveling procedures into, okay, these are skilled actions, but you just roll to see if you do them plus whatever that is, just moved everything into 4 very large buckets. And it was a really, really cool thing to pick up and play with for the first time. And it was like one of the biggest things we talked about afterwards. Like, well, what if, like, how do these work with, with, if you don't want to use an ability, do you have to, or HP was a big conversation right away. There are some other things, but overwhelmingly, the other change I think that we're making in the final version is like 7th level blank lines. Where like if you get to a 7th level, you just work with the GM to come up with something that is customized to your character based on all the play that you've done so far, right? Like your character has done a lot of this or had these experiences. What type of spell do you want to give them, or sneaky ability do you want to give them, or fighter ability do you want to give them that kind of takes that up to another level in your mind, right? So that's one other change that's going to happen in the final version also too, that I think just adds a lot if you're playing for a long time.
Yeah,
and I'm going to add one last thing about the archetypes, the roles. And this is aimed strictly at new players who have never played RPGs before. And I'm betting, I mean, when I started playing, like, I can't act. I don't know how to act in this situation. Hey, that's easy. You're bloodthirsty. Be bloodthirsty. So they can be role-playing prompts as well. Like, be sneaky. Okay, I'm a sneaky character. I know how to be sneaky.
I love that. Yeah. I hadn't really, because they're not they're not like the usual, part of speech that we have. It's usually like, strength or dexterity. It's not strong or dexterous. So changing it in that way, it does kind of, it's like, oh, I'm sneaky, or I'm sneaky and mystical, or sneaky and bloodthirsty. That does kind of, I can imagine, like a sneaky bloodthirsty character that sounds like an assassin, or a sneaky mystical character that sounds like a trickster, kind of, sneaking in the shadows and making people fall asleep. Like that's I love that. That's super cool. I love little details like that. So, actually, the one that stood out to me was saves, because it's like, also, it's just layers. It's just you also use them for saves when it's like, oh, if you're resisting a magical thing or a holy thing. It's so good. So good.
Well, the other thing that a lot of people who have run it, who are not the two of us, but even for me, running for the first time, the fact that all roles during the game are player-facing roles. Like, I, as the GM, I don't have to sit here and like roll and then think, okay, like, or be like, oh, okay, well, like they tied. What does that look like? I'm like, you roll. Here's the number you're trying to roll against, or don't tell them. It doesn't matter either way. And then they do it, but that lets me just focus consistently on narrative as the GM, and that's such a freeing process. Or even being like, everybody roll a d6 for me, and then I'll, as you're going, I'll tell you what happened based on the rolls that you got. It's really nice to not, for me, have to roll 4 d6s, write down each one of them were, map them to each person, and then come up with that. I roll, I think about what the consequences are. They tell me what they got. I tell them what the end result was. It's such a small thing, but it's a really freeing part of the process.
Good. As we're talking about actually playing it, I want to take a break from talking about the game itself. Marcus, I want to hear something that you're talking about. If a player has to drop out of a session, you have to kind of start fresh from scratch. Has there ever been something fun that's happened in one of these types of games that like draws you toward having a kind of shared world between like multiple characters, as opposed to just like playing a different game? Like, is there a fun dungeon crawling story, or where there's been crossover between storylines or anything?
Oh my God, let me think. I'm sorry to say, nothing that actually comes to mind right now. I'm sure as soon as the stream is over, things will pop up, but
right.
not right now. I'll holler later if I think of something.
Good. There's the kind of when we talk about the dungeons here, there's already a kind of like a shared kind of world, because instead of having like several discrete adventures, what you do here, if I'm just going to explain it to the audience, there's a lot of like tools and guidelines for building areas to explore, like not only the dungeons, like the tomb or the tower, but also like building areas of the city from the ground up. So it's like it's a kind of toolkit approach, rather than like, here's one adventure and you play it and you're done. There's like, you could have multiple dungeons or multiple towers, or you could like see how you could get familiar with how the tools work and then mix and match them yourself. Do you have more experience using toolkits rather than using written adventures, or do you, like, what drew you to one over the other?
I don't really have any experience with, especially not for the, I've used random dungeon generators and stuff like that, but I think this is actually the first time I've seen it put together like I tried to do. And once again, in the beginning, this was all about like to make it easy to use, to come up with an adventure on the fly. But I guess you could use it, like sit down and actually prep a cool dungeon using these tools as well. And like you said, like mix and match. I want to pick this monster from the tower and put it in the tomb. And I think you can do a lot of things. And they all have, that's one of the reoccurring themes, I would say, throughout Infernopolis and also throughout the dungeons, that we use these 4 adjectives to change the vibe. Kind of like I can't remember the game, but there's a game that uses the word tags, like you put tags on something.
Fate.
Yeah, fate. So this is kind of like tags, I guess. You put a tag on something, and immediately you create this vibe,
Right.
this atmosphere. Like instead of a banquet hall, it's now a gloomy banquet hall, and that brings all sorts of images to mind, and everybody at the table can like make up their own. Okay, I'm in a gloomy banquet hall. I know what it looks like.
Yeah, we got like moldering curtains and rotten food and like plates
Yep.
and goblets that are all withered with age and all that.
There you
Yeah,
go.
that's really good. I love that.
Mhm.
There's a so yeah, there's this kind of categorization that goes throughout the whole thing where we have I called it the tomb and the tower because I think that they do really have these, once again, kind of archetypal vibes, right? Where there's like you have an example dungeon layout here, but you could easily, like you said, go onto a dungeon generator website and just click it up, or just draw squares and connect them with lines on a piece of paper and just as you're going. But the way that you're supposed to use it, I see, is like you add one of the adjectives in the middle, right? So it'd be the flooded tomb, and then, or the infected tomb, and then you choose, like, you have all of these monsters that can go there, and you have all of these like sights, smells, and sounds that can go there, and you kind of just pick one. And I like that because like what it says to me is like if I'm a beginner coming to this game, then that says that a tomb is not just a tomb, right? And so if you have like a dungeon that's more than 7 levels, because like a touch that I really liked, it was subtle, but something that I liked about the example map is there's another set of stairs in after room 7, right? It doesn't tell you where they go, but they go somewhere. But I like that, like what this is saying to me is, as someone that maybe isn't familiar with tabletop RPGs or dungeon crawling, is that this area, these 7 rooms, they have a feeling, and that feeling is infected or flooded, and that's kind of what you kind of can return to if you need to, if you need like descriptive elements, or if you're wondering how the creatures there act or what it's like to go through these areas. And I like that kind of, it's like letting players learn by doing it, right? Rather than saying, because it doesn't say anywhere in there like every dungeon should have a vibe and a feeling, right? It just says, hey, here's 4 vibes, and you get to pick one, and that's going to influence the monsters that are there and what it looks like and smells like, and the creature that's inhabiting it, and all of these things. Which I don't know if there's a question that comes with that, but
no, I can expand on that, because actually when I first sat down to write the game, I created some boundaries for myself. The first rule was it has to fit both the character sheet and the entire rule system on one A5 page. And that limit sort of, I mean, you would think it would like hinder you, but it actually freed up a lot of creativity, because you had to get really creative with all the words. And as you were saying, the tombs, the tomb and the tower, they're not, I don't say anywhere, like, it is important for a game master to tell the players how the tomb smells. And like, I never say that, but it says clearly smells.
Right.
So when you read that, like, oh, okay, I guess this is important. I should like tell players how it smells.
A couple notes in the chat coming in. Bifford says Lady Blackbird did it beautifully, but doesn't say what, and because of the time delay. Oh, while it was on A4, the character sheet was half of that, and the rules were the lower half. So Lady Blackbird did a really great job of that same kind of minimalist idea.
That is one of the games I've been looking at. Yeah.
Good.
And then In Search of Games says, I want to run this game so badly, looking to jump into this soon. The adjective system sounds great. I'll tell you what, In Search of Games, if you want, whether you've backed already or not, but I mean, obviously, if people go back, that's great. Shoot me a message on Twitter, and I'll get you the current playtest packet if you want to take a look at some of this stuff, because we just dropped our open license yesterday. So we would love to have people looking at it, running it, taking what they're making, turning it into stuff. If people need help with graphics or layout or other stuff like that, we're super happy to help with that early on if somebody doesn't have those skills also too, just because we'd love to see what other people are doing with it. So drop me a message over on Twitter, and we'll make that happen.
Which reminds me, as a friend here in Sweden, a fellow RPGer, actually, like 2 days after I released it way back 9 months ago, he wrote like a vampire hack of this.
Oh, nice.
Instead of the roles, he had like Dracula, Nosferatu, Elizabeth Bathory, all these like historical vampire figures. I'm gonna reach out to him and tell him about the third-party license.
Yeah, and
sorry for interrupting.
Even when we were doing our public, hey Chris, yeah, message me later. Okay, I already got it. I got it to you. I just wanted to make sure. Chris already has it. So no, but that, I mean, like when we were playing in our public playtest, our friend Liam, who runs the Hobbled Goblin podcast, was a recurring character for the second half of our like weekly kind of rotating cast West Marches thing, where two adventurers were going through this mega dungeon, but every week they were joined by different PCs, and Liam was consistent through the second half of that, and really wanted there to be like darker like classes, and so made like the unholy, the alchemist, the cultist, and something else, and just whipped them up real quick after playing for the first time and wanting something a little bit different. Like I've made a space hack we're playing tomorrow that we released as part of the crowdfunding campaign called Through the Void, that is like you can be a tech or a recon or a medic or a merc. And those are the classes, and it's flavored differently and themed differently, and has some different, a couple different little touches to it. But the core system is so easy to build on. But everything Markus has showed me, like it is like I use the word elegant a lot to do it, and it's like it's on the campaign a couple places. But for me, elegance is not about like, it's about doing simple things to make everything work in the same direction, and the level of information design that just goes on the sheets that suggests everything that you need. I've been impressed by from day one, from seeing that character sheet. Then Markus ran us through the tomb, like on the live stream. It was the first time the game ever got played, and then had the tomb ready to go the next week. I think we went through the flooded tomb. It's just been such an interesting thing to watch develop, and it's such an iterative process that if you're, it's not just, hey, pick new words and pick a new thing, but that is a large part of it. And if you're somebody stepping into design or a GM or somebody who just wants to be able to homebrew it, the ability to think about those things and come up with it or build it out over time. Like I'm going to run this version of the vault, and then this version of the vault, and then this version of the vault with my players until they've robbed all the vaults in the area or whatever. They can do that. And like for me, the ability to give GMs not just like a set of here's some good tools, but actually like, hey, if you just want to, as you're building your own things, it's iterative, it's easy, and it also doesn't take a ton from you, because I want GMs to be able to come to the table as a different type of player, but as a player. And having run Down We Go a number of times now, like you absolutely, I take as much time prepping Down We Go as a GM, maybe plus 5 minutes, as I do as a player. Like, you know, like it's a very quick process to get ready to go.
Yeah. And it's also, if I can add one thing about the system, it's, I mean, since there's not a whole lot of moving parts, I would describe the mechanics as pretty robust, I guess. So, like, if you want to add whatever favorite house rule or favorite rule from your OSR game or retro cloner or D&D iteration or whatever, I mean, the system is not going to break,
right?
Just because you add little bits and pieces here and there.
I'm running tomorrow night. I'm running the Drain, which is already a mishmash of 0 level funnel concepts from like DCC type games with like mothership rules, and I'm taking it and I just modded it out to run Through the Void in, and that's what we're gonna do. But I was like, okay, what does a 0 level character look like in Down We Go / Through the Void, and how do I figure that out? And the big thing was just like 1 HP. Like that's a pretty easy, like, you know, like that's number one. Like you're gonna take a hit and that character is gonna die, right? That's gonna be it, end of the day. And then I was like, you know, I could go with, we have backgrounds in that one, so I was like, we could just give them backgrounds. But I was like, no, we'll give everybody like 1 level. Like every character can do a thing, but that's the only thing they can do. Basically, you've got 10 things you can do the entire time spread out amongst your like mob of characters. And that's going to be it. And we'll see how that goes. Like it's a good stress test to run a lot of things through. all at once. But it was interesting to think like, okay, there are no 0 level rules, but what's the intent there, and how do I just do that real quick? And it took maybe 5 minutes of writing out notes to figure out what that looked like.
Yeah. I think that I'm drawn to systems that are kind of hardy like that you can modify and add on to as you want. And I like that. I like things that feel like what really drew me into the tower and the crypt. Is that what it was? The crypt?
The tomb.
The tomb. Thank you. I was like, oh, it's close. Was like, it feels like I can draw on so many things at once, right? Like, I don't know why I was just thinking about, I mean, like, I guess it's obvious why. I was thinking about Skyrim while reading this. And I started thinking about the kind of areas that you run across in there. And I was like, if I wanted to make the blank camp or the blank mountain or, the blank temple, I could start doing that. And all I would need is to kind of follow the, like the building blocks that are laid out for the myriad of dungeons that you can already make, right? I can say, oh, I can, and so, by making just one, I'm actually making like 4 that I can use in other places. And I love that kind of like naturalistic example that is kind of like a teaching tool like that. So.
And that could be like a time saver for a GM. If you're prepping like a hex crawl, you have this big hex map, and you're going through your catalog of adventures and dungeons. You're looking through all your PDFs, like what should I put there? What should I put there? You can pull out the tower and like, okay, I got 4 towers in this region now.
Yeah, just immediately.
Yeah.
And then you just answer questions about them as players ask, right?
Right.
Because it's more about that conversation, as you were saying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It actually the one of the cool things it was this is another playtest process, and it wasn't a rule. It was just something Markus was doing, and it was great. And I was like, Markus, do you want that to be how people play the game? Because if so, we just need to make a note about it. Like that's all we need to do. And that's where the lore as loot conversation came up, where it's like typically rumors and other things like that are the purview of the GM, where they're like, I know what the rumor is. You roll to see how much you know. I'll tell you what it is. This way, it's like, hey, I'm the GM. I'm going to ask you as a player to tell me what a rumor is about the location you're going to, about the people who are actually there. You tell me the answer, and based on your answer, I could either roll or just decide how am I working this into the dungeon. So the players are now in the point of, and again, it takes the prep off the GM. Okay, you just told me that this is from a live stream we did the other night over my friend Brett's channel. The watcher in the tower has an eye that can float around and observe people. So when they got to the top level, the watcher had died long ago, but there was a creature on the top level who had that function, had a third eye that would float out and had been watching them as they had been coming up the entire way in the corner. And like there are all these things, but it was not I decided that. It was you tell me a thing, I'll work that into where we are going, and you'll encounter it there, which could be like it could be where powerful items come from, or treasure comes from, or it could be what type of enemies are there. But this ability to turn to the players and say, like, you tell me, and then I'll figure out what that looks like in the world, is a really great form of back and forth that certainly happens in tons of other styles of games, but is less common to be player facing in an OSR setting than it is in Down We Go. And I really, really love it. Aaron King, who's one of our contributors, did a really great rumor table for the city and some of the surrounding dungeons that exist also too, that are just absolutely insane and amazing. There's like D20 of them in the book currently. And so
nice.
I'm super excited about it.
I like the I like that there's oh wow, my brain just completely emptied out. Yeah, so there's the conversation that you're starting between GMs and players, where you're like, hey, let's open this up. The GM is a player, and as much as players love being surprised at things, that it allows, but by starting that conversation, the GM is also allowed to be, or gets the opportunity to be surprised by things, and then in turn add a twist to it, because there's a table here that says, let's see where it is. I think there's a I thought there was a table about like modifying the rumor, like how true it is.
Yeah.
Or maybe that's just up to the GM. Am I making that up?
That's in there somewhere.
It's in there somewhere. Things
yeah.
have moved around a little bit recently, so I'm trying to remember exactly where it is. But
it's in the ref guide for the dungeons.
It's in the ref guide for the dungeons. Yeah. So, anyways, it is a very cool, like, again, like, rather than you roll a dice and tell me, it's like you tell me and then I'll roll a dice and then I'll know how much it is, which a supplement that does that incredibly well. I would love to do a 4-part stream, and I've told Matt this on Twitter a couple times. Matt Sanders, what is it? We Sail Beyond. Have you heard of the Beast? And the other one in that series are great world building things, but they do very similar pieces, and I think they're like ideal supplements to go along with a game like Down We Go. Because there is this, like, you're in a tavern or wherever you're at, and like people just kind of say, like, you know, as NPCs / players in the room, you all kind of just kick out ideas and you build this hex map, and We Sail Beyond, and the GM writes down what's actually happening on the map, and then the players have a map of all the rumors that they've heard, and so both are working with the map, and the GM's is accurate and the players is somewhat accurate, and watching the interplay between those two things happen is just such a cool way to play. And it's not like it should, I think it should influence the way people think about how they do that style of play and world building in all their games. But I think it's so prime for something like Down We Go that already has an element of that built in.
Because I mean, I've always considered, I mean, if you very roughly label games, role-playing games, as either OSR, like traditional games, or like the more like coming out of the Forge, shared storytelling, those types of games.
Yeah.
I've always considered OSR to have so much more in common with the other end of the spectrum than the traditional games in the middle. I don't know if you folks in the USA split them up like this, but and this is like this thing, because when Tony first mentioned this idea, I wrote it into the adventure, and I started GMing, like asking the players for rumors, and then Tony started talking about adding it to the game. I was a bit iffy about it first, but I mean, it grew on me so much, and like I couldn't imagine Down We Go without it right now. And to me, that sort of blends some part of OSR with some part of like, I don't know the English term.
Story game.
Yeah.
Story game. Yeah. That becomes like a somewhat of a merger between those two styles of play, I would say.
Yeah, because I mean, like when you talk about it being more about the conversation than about the rules, you know, the rules not getting in the way, I think that is, you know, the goal. I think that's the goal, right? It's telling a story together, as opposed to like moving pieces around on a board game, you know. I think that's there's some good crossover there, and I think that the kind of question answer thing I've seen a lot in like is it Belonging Outside Belonging, that just has a lot of like asking and answering questions, and a lot of that is between the writer and the there's not always a game master, but then the game master, and we see that also here in Down We Go, where there's like questions that you write down for the referee to answer, right? And so it's kind of a mix of, you know, we're talking a lot about how this is a game that is supposed to be kind of accessible and how it has a lot of teaching tools, and I think this is a shining example also, because it's like for the ref questions, it's saying, you know, you know your table better than I do, and you know your own, like the media that you pull from, and so when you say, like, for the let's say for the temple, right, you say ref questions that you're supposed to answer, or is this for the ref to answer, or is it for the players to answer?
It's for the ref to ask of the players.
That is so cool. Okay, I thought it was because I'm thinking of this a lot as like, I see them and I immediately think, oh, these are prep tools, right? Like you're supposed to do this beforehand and like make a tempo, but it's a conversation that happens in the moment, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was the idea.
And it could be done. Like, I mean, you absolutely could use them to prep. If you're like,
sure,
I want this to be the case, like as a ref, like do that. Like that's fine. Absolutely. But I think they're oftentimes at their best, and tell us a little bit more about. I think they open up a lot more whenever we're able to ask them to the players. But yeah, trying to scroll down to the temple so people can get a look at that on the screen as we're going. And
Page 10.
that's not how mine works. There, it is. It's this top corner up here. What deity is worshipped here? What's the domain of this deity? What's their symbol? How are the priests dressed? And some of that came from like, do we want to make a pantheon for this game? And the answer was, we don't. Like, we don't want to make the pantheon for this game. We want you to decide what the pantheon for this game is. Like, at your table, around your table, like what? Because immediately when you're saying what is worshipped, you're also saying what's something that some people here place importance on, right?
Yeah.
And so dictating that from the outside is always a very interesting thing in gameplay. And if somebody's writing an adventure or a dungeon and they want to dictate something like that just in the text, like, great, it's real easy to do. Like, by picking your adjectives or a sentence at the top to say, this is a blank, this is a place where blank is worshipped. Here are 3 questions that you might ask about that, though, which is like, how do they worship him? What offerings are there? What religious ritual are things, are a part of that? And so like, there's all these different ways that you can kind of look at it and approach it that mix what the GM has determined and the other thing. The way I'm prepping games right now for all the ones I'm running is I'll typically roll up. I'll pick what the location is. I'll roll the adjective, and then I'll roll the faction that I want to be entangled in the adventure. And that faction is invariably going to want something out of that dungeon. And what that faction is and what the location is tells me everything I need to know about why the adventurers are getting sent down in that dungeon. And it's been such an easy process. Like, it's a roll a D10, have that prompt read about what the faction is out loud to everybody, and then like, bam, down into the dungeon looking for whatever the most logical thing is to go down there for. So that was looking for a special red coffee bean for an adventure I ran in the tower recently, but we used the Undying Sands by Games Omnivorous for our launch stream the other day. And so it was like, why are they going to sands? But I had them roll randomly, and there is a faction called the Dirt Lickers that got rolled for that game. And so then it's like, well, now we obviously know they're sending you, and it's 100% what it sounds like. They taste dirt looking for like sublime inspiration, and the rarer forms of dirt give them greater power. And so like, they got sent out for special types of sand. Like, but it was just a couple of random rolls, and we're already going to the Undying Sands. And so obviously you've got to get 3 special types of sand out there. And then we just hex crawled through the process. It was so easy to do. And as a GM, like, took like, I mean, on stream, I'm like, I should have looked at some of this stuff beforehand, and I didn't. Like, let's go. Somebody roll this, read the faction out loud so everybody knows who that is. All right, let's talk about how you know that faction, who's worked with them, what your relationship was with them, and then we'll go into the process of role playing through the ask. And so it was just really great. A couple people in chat say, Michael Harmon says, not Naito says, hi. And then down we go from Michael Harmon is looking really good on Gamefound. Thank you so much. And then Bifford says again, the nice simple graphics and layout are good and uncluttered. I do not like the large title font. The letters are hard to read, especially the strange ones like the E and the T, which would be hard for people to read a lot of. We've talked a little bit about that. I'd love to hear more feedback around how people feel about the font choice. We actually really like it because it is one that is modeled off of old crypts from Spain in a certain time period, but we 100% know that also too. We use that font, really sparingly within the text itself. It's almost all a normal serif font, but anyways, thanks to everybody for tuning in. I just wanted to catch us up on chat and pass it back over to you, Vi.
All right. I want to ask about art, but before I ask about art, because I want to hear about like all of your contributors, because there's a lot of cool people that have been working on this in a variety of aspects. But as a kind of leading into that, but also talking about Infinopolis, what are the I want to know, like, because there's a lot of like metropoli metropoles in kind of fiction. There's there's tons that are modeled after like London. There's some that are modeled after places in the Americas, and there's I would like. But were there any texts that were like any fictional metropoles that were that you pulled inspiration from for Infinitopolis?
Kind of all of them, I guess. Yeah. And
like, kind of some Ankh-Morpork and some
yeah.
what's the one from anyway, but yeah, tell me about that.
And I mean, I wanted this to be the way I envisioned it at first was that you have this world. It's full of ruins, dungeons, old temples, old crypts. And I'm guessing a world like that, if we're going to play an OSR RPG in a world like that, we have to have a bunch of adventurers going back and forth, just looting, pilfering, plundering tombs.
Yeah.
And they have to have a place to sell all that stuff. So there's this huge sprawling city, and throughout the times, I mean, all the stuff being brought back, all the artifacts, all the old tomes, like changes Infinitopolis. This is the way I see it. So it's an ever-shifting city. It changes from, like, every time you visit it, you have all these districts, and you roll up adjectives for these too. Oh, and Tony, I have such cool ideas for hirelings and holdings. I'm thinking, like, I gotta take this right now because I can't hold it back. This idea is so cool. Because, when you get to level 7, you get to add like your own ability. I'm thinking doing the same for Infinitopolis. Like when you reach a certain level, you get to add your own adjectives to the list, or that's even cool. Cement one of the adjectives. Like from now on, this district is this.
Yeah.
So the city is changing, and Tony, you describe like the howling, growling, feeding. You described the city so good. Please do it.
Yeah, like it was really, I was actually like, it was funny because as we started, was it before I even actually had formally started the development process, but it was like, I think we had played it and I was like, man, it would be really helpful if there was just like one page of city rules that give a sense of economy and scale and like what to do during downtime. Because originally in the game, it was like, roll the loot at the end, and that's how well or poorly you survive after going through this dungeon. That was it, right? So coins didn't really have any sort of ongoing function. There was no real sense of like, what does it mean to have 100 coins versus 1,000 coins? And I was like, yeah, if you had like one page, it was like some simple economy and some simple downtime stuff, that'd be great. And then Markus came back like a couple weeks later with the Infinitopolis document that was like 8 pages or something like that. And I was like, all right, so this is not going to be just a 12-page print. We're going to make this a big thing, and we're going to do a big campaign. We're going to go get some cool art now, and we're going to like, because this is great and this is amazing.
Good.
But yeah, like I think it was at some point like I was like because like I love the anti, and by we talked about this before around like Troika. I love anti-canon concepts, and I think Troika City as a concept does that really well. Though I think it's confusing for a lot of people because they don't. Well, because Troika is, but also because they don't understand the edges of how a lot of that works. Infinitopolis, I feel like, gives a really great structure for saying, like, no, this city is essentially, whether it's alive or not, because it's something you decide around your player table, there is an intentional mode at which if you leave, you know that more than likely when you come back, this place is going to be different. You'll find the exact same people here doing some of the exact same things, but there will be more people, or maybe they've moved to a different district at this point in time because this place was no longer hospitable. But that shifting reality created a great space for anti-canon in your own game while still giving some rules that made it really easy to wrap your brain around as a GM and as a player. And so Infinitopolis being this hungry city that only kind of works or operates because delvers go out and get stuff and bring it back. And otherwise there's no way this city would survive. It would grind to a halt. It's not the local economy that makes it work. The city itself kind of demands people have to go out and explore and bring things back to me because otherwise we cannot survive. And that's a different type of impetus for why we go out. And no one like we've done the longest campaign we've done is 5 weeks so far. We'll see what comes up at people's tables, but I know that some people have already been like, well, I want to dive down into the heart of that and figure out what causes it to operate. Is it alive or whatever? And I was like, you should absolutely do that. You should absolutely write adventures about that. And they're like, well, what, like, are there any rules for that? I'm like, no, absolutely not. And if somebody else writes a different one that has a different explanation, that's fine also too. It doesn't matter. Like, people can pick that one up and play it, and then pick this one up and play it, because maybe there's numerous things in place that affect all these different things. Or maybe once one is taken out, another one crops up in its place. And that level of the city maybe being sentient, maybe just being the effect of all the powerful forces at play, maybe just being the democratized mass of individuals who don't even understand how what they do impact each other. All that is up to you at your table. What you do know is, if people don't go out into the dungeons and the ruins and the towers that dot the landscape around the city grinds to a halt. And so you need to do that. And so it creates a really like interesting reality. And in our actual play, it was really funny because that knowledge, Richard Ruane from Arrook Press was played all 5 weeks with us, was Borba the Sneaky. And on the first session, and the first thing was like, was applying for my dungeon license to be able to go down into this dungeon, which was not a thing at all. I mean, like, Richard spoke it into existence and had forged paperwork to be able to go down to this dungeon because he was Borba the Sneaky. So it wasn't even a real thing. But then invoking having the right paperwork in the dungeon when we encountered different sentient individuals was a constant conversation that came up. And it was really about proper paperwork and other stuff like that. It didn't interfere with any of the classic other OSR pieces, but it was just great background piece. And Richard's interpretation of that was, well, if we're dependent on going out, there's obviously probably some sort of local bureaucracy that deals with that. So I'm just going to name that. And that became kind of mine and his character's initial entanglement, or his and Thrag, the other main character's initial entanglement on that first session was, they made up a fake religion, and it turns out Thrag was actually a member of that religion that they thought they had made up. And that was like, so he had to go with him in order for him to have access to it based on the paperwork he had forged. And again, that kind of emergent narrative stuff is great, but it was Richard's interpretation of, what does it mean for the city to depend on this? Bureaucracy has formed, and now there has to be proper paperwork, and you lay claim to a dungeon, and then you work the dungeon and bring stuff back until that dungeon is done, and then it kind of gets opened up to the rabble. And that's just an absolutely great thing. Bifford, go ahead and type in whatever you want me to look up into the chat without a link, because you can't put links into Twitch because it's a way to stop spammer bots, or just drop it to me over on Twitter also too. But if you type it out, I'll Google it in a little bit also.
Then I think one of the last things I want to chat about here, we've been going for just about an hour, which is great. I think there's the things that you have as, the stretch goals, like the additional music tracks. You have a bunch of new art you're bringing in, you're like expanding the team. Markus or Tony, which one of you was in charge of like who you brought on the team, and who kind of who did you like? How did that picking process go for your additional contributors?
It was back and forth, but basically I said to Markus, like, I wrote down who I was like interested in working with and knew like people who I liked the work that they did. But I was like, Markus, like, tell me the hit list of people you would love to have work on this project, and then I will do my cocky, like, Caucasian American thing of just being comfortable contacting them and asking them to work on it. And so it was back and forth. So, Markus gave me a couple names, and I reached out to a lot of those people who I knew, or if I didn't know them, I was like, do you know them at all? Do you want to reach out to them? So it was a little bit back and forth there. And that's like, we got the art from Skull Fungus because Markus reached out to them and they weren't able to work on it, but they had a piece of art that they didn't have any plans for. And so they were like, I have a piece of art. I can sell it to you and be a part of the project. That's all I can do. Baby is on the way. Ava Islam was top of my list. And I reached out to Ava right away and was like, I love the procedures Ava does for Errant and the way that Ava thinks about old school style play. And I was like, hey, I want you to read this. And I just want you to tell me, what is the thing you want to add to this? It could be a dungeon. It could be something else. And she was like, I want to add in a hex crawl adventure. Is that cool? I was like, yeah, but then you also have to create hex crawl procedures because there aren't any. And so I said one A5 page, here's how to hex crawl, and down we go. And then we'll do an adventure. And then Madeline Ember's doing the art for that. That was one of the later team members, but some of it I put out in the brain trust and was like, we're doing this. And if you're interested in being a part of it, let me know. We're going to be bringing a lot of people on. But then after we kind of went through that initial draft and we're in that open phase, we'd brought in Simone
Oh,
Tameta,
sorry.
who Marcus had worked on for Cold Wind Whispering. Do you have your copy of Cold Wind Whispering right there? Which is Marcus's other
Nice.
OSR. It's a sci-fi setting and supplement that Marcus had just released. Simone, who's done all the most of the art for the game, did all that. We looked at Simone and Billy Blue. Both are great. Both are wonderful. Would have hired either one. Because Marcus had already been working with Simone, we went with Simone, and it was absolutely a great choice to make. But then it was like, okay, I'm in the U.S. We've got a Swedish designer. We've got an Italian creator. We've got a Canadian hex crawl designer. Like, how global can we make this project? And I was like, I would love to include the RPGC communities in this. I would have loved to include the RPG Latin American community in this. And so I put out, and like, I mean, I could have just gone to Diogo, and I could have gone to like, Dub Taylor, Pamu, and a couple other people who I knew, but I just put out and said, if you were going to do work in the OSR and you're a part of this community, who are the people you kind of think are great people to work with or that you would want to work with? And just looked for the communities themselves to make some recommendations.
And then you hit follow on each of those.
Absolutely. And we even have it like, so like, that's like, Sam is both a member of the Brain Trust, but also somebody who plays on +1 streams from time to time. And I just love their writing. BJ, and I don't know if that I'm pronouncing BJ's last name correctly, either Recchio or Recio, is another Filipino designer who's expanding the bestiary for us, but does just amazing thinking about monsters. So a lot of different things, but Aaron King is one of my favorite adventure designers, is prolific. Aaron did the factions and the rumors, which are in the current playtest materials. It's really interesting because other people are like, when's the deadline? Aaron was like, I want to do this. And I was like, okay, let's make it happen. And then 3 hours later was like, here's 4 factions. Are these kind of what you're looking for? And I was like, these are great. These are amazing.
Absolutely.
I don't know what I was looking for, but this is it.
Beautiful.
Yeah. And then like was like, cool. I'll need to work some more, but I'll get back to you. And I was just like, okay, thinking like in a couple of weeks when we had like, we never set a deadline because Aaron the next morning finished all the factions and rumors and sent them to me. And they are such an amazing collaborator. Has been so fun to have them in, and as part of the process. It's content neither Marcus or I would have done as good of a job of creating. But Keegan is doing an Acropolis pamphlet. I love the way Keegan thinks about dead things. MV played in our actual play. But MV, if MV has an OSR skill, it's Charm GM, like is one of the people who constantly will come up with the most creative characters. Plays mostly like you played the crab person in our Troika stream, like plays like nonverbal, different, like very odd characters. So played Lava Ghost in that just so it's like MV thinks about NPCs and player characters in such an interesting way. So had them do NPC design. I just got the draft of those back, and they're absolutely gorgeous. Like Marcus talked earlier about how OSR games and story games oftentimes have overlap. The NPC system that MV came up with for how we design them in the system is called like low key, basically is what we're calling it, but it's the letters represent different things. They read almost like little mini belonging outside belonging like character books. Like they're almost lyric. It was really funny. I mean, it was like, oh man, I really tried to scale back on the lyric, and I was like, no, but it's like perfect. Like, like one of the characters' look is a drop of sunlight muddled by time, right? Like it's such a good thing, but it's very clear like what this character wants, what they look like, what's something they know, and what's something they have that might all be interesting to players, right? And it's very condensed, it's very precise, but again, it's very formulaic. One of the people who came onto the team that I was really excited about is Walton, who's doing the editing, who approached me, which is like, has been a fan of the game since some of the earlier releases, since we put it up for Edge funding. It was like, I would like to work on this game. Can I work on this game? And that type of enthusiasm coming in is always great. Jeremy Gage, Loot the Body. Diogo has come on now. Like we've got a bunch of other people who are doing stretch goals. And anyways, it's getting to be more and more global of a project as we do that. And so it's been an absolute blast. But it was that mix. You know, Marcus saying, here's people I'm interested in. And I said, great. And I reached out to as many of them as I could, and then just started building out people to do other small things. And
and
like,
this was
15 countries on like 5 different continents contributing to the game at the end of the day.
Wow.
This was actually almost the exact same feeling as when I was a young kid listening to heavy metal, Iron Maiden and Kiss, groups like that. And I had this reoccurring dream of being at one of their concerts, and Paul Stanley just handed me a guitar and invited me on stage. This is actually what it feels like to be working and seeing names like Diogo and having art by Johan Noor and Nate, also one of the stretch goals. It just feels surreal.
Yeah. I love when projects do this, no matter where they start, with like just their ability to just like reach out across the entire world and have just like all of these very cool collaborators bringing their talents. And you said that there was I think it was the NPC, one of the people that was running for NPCs or factions. I forget who. There's there's more than I even knew. But you said that it's better than you, Markus, or Tony could have done.
Oh, that's for
and
factions,
like,
yeah.
Which one?
That was for factions, but it's also, I think, true of the NPCs. Like,
and like that's what you want from like additional collaborators, is like, someone who has something that they can bring to the table that's more than more than what any existing contributor can bring, and like let their voice and skills shine in that way. And that is super cool.
Well, and I think like I was thinking about this the other day, because I was cramming some old collabs without permission videos, because I had gone to grab the link and things just started playing. I just left them up in the background, but like I hit the one where you were talking about like the emergence of Sword Dream and the Sword Dream Jam and other stuff like that. But I do like we're using the OSR hashtag for a number of reasons, which we could all get into, but we don't have the time for right now. That's a great conversation for another call. But like, I will use the Sword Dream one every once in a while, because I do feel like a lot of what we're doing really was the intent of Sword Dream, right? Like this is not like, and it is not just other people, but it was an intentional choice to say, I want people who are in different parts of the world and who have a different background and who think about things in a different way than Markus and I do, and that's shaped by our culture and our gender and the way that we look at the world and our personal experiences. And that can happen with two individuals from any one country. Obviously, they're going to approach things differently, but I think we magnify that and we open it up and we make something more ours and less mine whenever we're very intentional about going out and doing that. And for me, like a lot of what I love about Sword Dream is the idea that like this is about making the game I want to make, but it is also about not putting up barriers from other people being able to do something similar in the exact same space. And I think by inviting those voices in from the get-go and making this ours, we are far better at creating something that models how we do that than if we were just like, I'm going to sit down and make this thing, right?
Yeah. Right. That's awesome. That's the dream. There's a project I was on recently that was framing it that way. That's like, oh yeah, Vi contributed a little bit, but they are like one of the core members. And I was like, just thinking about projects in that way, because they're always, it's always far more than one person, no matter what happens, Yeah. And I think that's, I think that is an aspirational, a healthy way to view projects in that way. And it's awesome to hear you going down that road. How much longer is Down We Go on Gamefound then?
22 days.
Yeah.
Like we're just right at
All
the
right.
beginning.
Yep. Good.
I will say this: the biggest challenge, and there is a level. I don't know that I've told Markus this, but it is probably true. By putting it on Gamefound, there's a large chance that we are leaving money on the table. Like Kickstarter is something people are used to. There's discoverability. There's a lot of other things that come in there. I think Gamefound is a better tool. Period. I think the design is better. It's accessible to people in Latin America, which Kickstarter is not. And when I asked why it wasn't available in RPGC, I was able to get like communities in Southeast Asia. I was able to get a clear answer about what is the limitation for them on being able to do that, which only has to do with where their payment processing partner has physical locations, and therefore they're able to do things. Like that's a very clear answer that I'm like, oh, well, that actually makes sense, and I can understand that, and that makes it great to be able to wrap my brain around. But I think it's designed better. I think the ability to navigate things more clearly. I think being able to do add-ons as well as pledge levels directly, and letting people kind of pick and choose what they want. The ability to showcase stretch goals. A lot of the other tools are great, but people aren't on it. Right? We're the second RPG to launch on it. We're the first really very small project to launch on it also too, comparatively. Most of the other projects are $20,000 plus funding goals. And so it is a different scale, but Gamefound really has been very invitational, and really would love to see more people from the indie RPG community on it. And I'm somebody who's always very comfortable stepping into that, knowing like we can always make more money. Like we can, if we don't hit all the stretch goals and we want to bundle them together later and do another print and to fund those specific goals, like we can come back around and do that now, knowing that we've got the game in people's hands and more people know about it and other things like that. Like we can always do more in the future. And so being able to create a new space that that embraces more people in a different way, and I think is a better tool overall, is exciting. But we would love anybody's help, just getting the word out. Anything you can do to help share is always appreciated. We're doing a lot of live streams. We have a lot of other stuff, scheduled throughout, but it is the number one thing that I'll continue to say is we can always use help getting the word out.
Yep. Get those links floating around the internet.
Bifford, I also recommend not overloading myself with too many stretch goals. I like to pack in like a lot of them up front, like they just kind of help be exciting early on because I like that. But then later on, like they are much more spread out and paced also too. And so, and I don't think any of the things that we're adding are doing anything other than letting us add another voice that we're like, this is my thing. Like anytime you're doing a Kickstarter, it's great time to go find the people you would love to work with and say, how much would it cost to pay you? The main project is going to be the main project. But what is something that your voice can uniquely add to that? And all those people who you see on the core team, all the content they're adding was brought in right from the very beginning. Diogo's adding a dungeon. Roll for Tarask is doing a point crawl. They're things that are great to add on, but don't add something that would have been missing otherwise to the core project.
Right. Very, very cool. Well, I think that's all the questions I had written down. We've got through the whole document, talked about Infinopolis, talked about some of the stuff that's being written that's not in the playtest right now. Is there anything else, Marcus, that you'd want to say about the project before we close out the stream? Is that a good time, Tony?
Yeah. No, I don't think I have anything else. Check out the page, spread the link, go get the game, have fun.
Awesome.
Vi, do you remember this? Do you remember the sign off you created for Prestige class?
I actually don't. I remember the reaction roll one that I made. Don't make me a camp counselor again, Tony. What was it?
No, I think you didn't have the reaction roll one. This is the one you did. This has been Prestige class with Vi Huntsman, or with whoever you're interviewing. Class dismissed, and then we do this.
Because I do the click thing.
That's right.
All right. Well, then before we do that, Tony, this is your channel.
Hold on. Bifford has a really great question. Why does Dungeon Delver have $18 in the graphics and $20 on the list? Because no one has asked me that question yet, and because there's an error on the graphic. It is a $20 pledge level. I'm sure that's when we were finessing things, and I'm sure I just missed that. But we are 3 days in with a lot of people having backed at that level, and you are the first one to ask. So there you go. All right, back over to Vi.
That's all right. Thank you. Things fall through the cracks. It's fine.
I'll get it updated tonight.
Yeah, exactly. Tony, this is your channel. This is Plus One EXP's Roll for Content channel, about where you talk with creators and games, and you play games, and tell us about you. Is there anywhere else that you'd like to? I know you're on Facebook, Twitch, YouTube.
Yeah, at Plus One EXP across all social media platforms, and then +1exp.com if you want to pick up our old games, like our game that we released in February, Beards and Beyond, which was from Zine Quest 2. If you want to check out Repugnant, follow us and Terrible Games. It'll be releasing in the next month or two. And then if you want to find iToaster, which is my my love letter / me processing this trauma from Brave Little Toaster, you can go to ttrpg.link /toaster. And it'll take you to our itch page, which will also link out to Exalted Funeral, where you can get it in print. It's back in stock. It's my first game to ever get a second print run. It's because the last 4 pages weren't printed on the first print run, but it's still exciting to have a second print run of one of my games. And so, go check out any of that great stuff.
Yeah, and then Marcus, I know that if you go to Google and type on Down We Go TTRPG, it's the second link there for the Gamefound. But is there anything else you want people to know about you?
If you want to talk to me about whatever, just find me on Twitter. I'm Apes of Wrath _RPG. And if you go to Drive Through RPG, that's also my I'm Apes of Wrath there as well. If you want to get your hands on one of these beauties. Coldwood Whispering, a system-neutral path crawl on a frozen mountain.
Beautiful.
We have a last-minute question that I'm not going to answer, but I am going to read and tell them where they can find the answer. In Search of Games says, I have a question. What's next for the team? What comes after Down We Go? What's going into the DW 2.0 box set edition? Tune in tomorrow night to our Through the Void actual play at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Again, we're going to be playing the Drain by Ian Newsom, and I will talk more about some of our ideas for what is next after this during the Q&A on that stream. So come on back for that.
Very cool. And I am your host here on Plus One EXP for the second time. I'm usually around on Collabs Without Permission on YouTube. Go check out my Mothership review. It's the one that people seem to like. It's my people's favorite video so far. I'm on Twitter. I'm around a couple places on Discord. Come say hi. Come check it out. That is it. This has been Prestige Class with Vi Huntsman. Class dismissed.
All right, thanks so much, Vi. I'm going to take us out. Here's some more of that Dungeon Synth goodness by Loot the Body.
Good.